patches. These are the patches for the tube. This is some sandpaper, which is used for abrading it, and we'll show you how to do that. There's some variation in patches. You don't want one that's so big that it's hard to apply to the tube, like this one might be a little, oh, that's fine there. We have a vulcanizing solution right here, fluid, which will prepare the tube to adhere to the patch. And we have tire levers. Tire levers come in different shapes and sizes. This didn't work.
No.
Gave up on that. But they come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them are fairly narrow. This is your standard one. The ones we like are these ones because they're a little thinner and a lot easier to press your hand into. Putting your force on this, it's not very comfortable as you're applying it, and it tends to be a little thicker there. So we like these ones because they're narrow and they work really well.
Tend to like the plastic ones as well because they come with rounder edges and they're not likely to have any kind of burrs or sharp bits. You can get steel ones, aluminum ones even, but when you're sticking your tire lever in, you're also more likely then to put another puncture in your tube while doing so. So sticking with plastic is almost always the best choice.
Also, if you need the force that a metal tire lever allows you, you're probably doing something wrong or something is very broken. And you can cause damage to your rim as well. You do not want to do that. That's going to be a very expensive fix. Okay, where's my example? Oh, right here. Aha. Okay, so this has a hole in it. If you had a flat, it's making sound. The first thing you want to do is let out all the air. So this one, I guess it might have let out most of its air, but let out the rest of the air because as it starts deflating when it's at a lower pressure. So I'm doing this is a Schrader valve. I'm just pushing in the middle here. If it's a Presta valve, as we showed before, you'd unscrew it and push them in. So we want to get all the air out of this tube. I'm pushing down on it. Next, so on the tire we have this bead right here, which is this little lipped region right here. And then there's a matching lip inside the rim here. And we just want to release the tire from that first. Because if you're pulling against it and it's caught in there, it's going to be kind of difficult to get it off. So first loosen it up, make sure it's free. Then I prefer starting on the opposite side of the valve because if you start pulling and tugging near the valve, you can cause damage to that. Once you tear the valve off, you're not really going to patch that. It's probably technically possible, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, to use a tire level, I'm going to do this backwards. You probably want to have this facing you. This is the textbook way. Put a tire level in here.
Give me a much harder tire.
Yeah, I did. That's why I didn't want one of them to use that. Okay, so I'm going to just put it over here. There's a scooped section right here. What I'm doing is I'm making sure that this grips just the outside of the tire. You don't want it to grab any part of the tube. If you grab the tube and you're trying to do this, you might introduce a new tear in your tube. So, and then somewhere over here, I'm going to pop it off over here. Now if it's fairly loose, at that point, we can keep going, or this one is actually reasonably loose enough, and what you can do is you can just move this over here. Make sure that you don't have the tube stuck between your tire lever and your tire, because that will cause some damage. So I'm going to pull this off. So I got one side of the bead off. As long as the valve is over here, what I can do then is make sure the tube is kind of not out of the way. Make sure the tube is out of the way. And then I'm going to just pull it off. You see there's a gap there, and I'm not grabbing any tube. I'm just pulling it off. I'm on the opposite side of the, that's not the tube. Okay. I'm on the opposite side of the valve. I'm just pulling it off. And then you don't want to tear like this because that valve is fairly delicate there. Push that out. Now I've taken it off. We're going to say that the rim tape is in good shape even though it's been patched in various ways, but for demonstration purposes, it's okay. But you do want to check that before you assemble anything else. Make sure there's no debris in there and that it's in good shape.
If you have to replace that, do you just lay it on there or does it stick?
This, sometimes, some of them stick. You can get a cloth kind, which I don't have today, which has an adhesive normally and goes around. That's really nice. Some of them are plastic and will fit over. This is just a rubber band kind of thing that pops over. And it essentially make sure you line up the valve hole. Very important. But other than that, make sure it's also the same width. You never want your rim tape to come up onto the side and interfere with the bead mating with your your tire, because your tire can pop off the edge. And Ramon's proving to me that he can actually disassemble that thing. Okay, so the next step is, well,
A question on the
Yeah.
rim tape. Is there anything you put on the rim first before you put the rim tape on, or you just put it right on the wheel?
this one's just a rubber band, this style. Some of them are adhesive, you want it to be clean before you apply it. You can use certain types of tape as long as they have something in them to prevent wear with the metal, but you need to be careful with that. Not want to do this because you might not want to mark up your tire, but I'm going to do this on this example. So we took this out of here. I marked there, that's the valve. I might mark this direction is one direction I took from here, that way I know where the valve was. And the important thing of that is, then I want to check, I'll run my fingers, I know I actually intentionally punctured this, so I know there's nothing in here. But what I would do is run my fingers gently along the inside. You don't want to be rushing, because if there is something sharp in there, you do not want to cut your finger. Feeling, observing from the outside, you can also invert it and look at it and check for any puncturing, anything puncturing and staying intact into there. Now there isn't going to be in here because I punctured it with a push pin before we start this class. But what you want to do is make sure you find anything and remove it, and make sure there's no debris sticking in here. Next, we want to find the hole in the tube. So to do that, I'm going to inflate the tube a little beyond its normal size. Now there's nothing to contain it, so you can actually inflate these quite large, but you don't want to go too far because and leave them too far. You hear something? Oh, I found it pretty easily. So this one has a hole. Actually, there's a bucket of water too that you can immerse it in and look for bubbles. But this one I can hear pretty well, and it's right here. It's on the outside. You can see that it's outside here. So that means it most likely was something from the tire. I know it was something from the tire because I pushed a push pin into it. I need to mark this before I. Okay. And so if you find a hole inside the side or on the inside portion, especially the inside, you need to wash your rim tape to make sure that that's intact. Okay. Now I found this hole right here. It's a little tiny puncture. So it's about right there. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to patch it, so I'm going to put a patch over it and mark outside where the patch is. The reason I'm marking, we didn't bring pens, and my marker is out of ink. So I'm marking outside of this area because I am then going to abrade this surface. And after I braid the surface, there's not going to be any mark in the middle of where my hole was. And if it's a small hole, it might be pretty hard to see. So I'm going to get this sandpaper, and you can see that this is kind of a sheen to it. There's also a seam right here, which kind of gets in the way. And what I'm going to do is abrade this surface because this tube has been treated when they're making a factory and they have a bunch of tubes. They tend to pile them to store them. And if you have raw rubber, what will happen is you're going to have what happens to gummy bears when you leave them in a container in a hot car or something like that. They will all adhere to each other, and that doesn't do anything good when you're trying to sell tubes. So these are treated so they will not adhere to other things. And on the inside of the tube, there's actually talc or some other kind of release agent inside there that will not allow it to adhere readily. So we need to get this raw surface, and we also need to get any gunk and dirt off of it. And so, I don't know if you can see the color is quite different. We've got this very, what do you call it? Dull, matte surface rather than the shiny surface on the outside. And this is not the best sandpaper, but so you want that to be bigger than this patch is going to be. And I'm going to end up using this smaller patch. Now realize I'm doing this with the, and you don't really want to touch it, but I've got gloves on. And you want to keep it a clean surface so that you can work with it. So I've worn down this little seam right here and kind of working on this side over here so that we have a raw rubber surface. And then what I want to do, so you've noticed that I've kept it inflated a little bit. That's just to make it a little easier for me to abrade it, because if it's flat, I'd have to actually put it on against a table or something, or my hand. And that makes it a little easier. But when you apply the patch, you do not want to have air this time. Because then when you deflate it later, that patch is going to crumple and will not do very well. Okay, so now I'm letting all the rest of the air out here. You can see the difference in that right there. Clear. Going to put, where's the big, oh. It says professional use only. Normally you'd have a little container like this, and once you puncture this, it does not last very long because it has a lot of volatile compounds, and they will leave you with a bunch of gunk right there. So we have this larger can, which is far too easy to apply, way more than you need. So I'm gonna try to get a small one. I'm gonna put a very thin layer of this. Okay, so you can see it's at first fairly shiny. Just let me close this because we want it to last. So you can see at first it's fairly shiny right there. And you want to wait until it's kind of a dull, tacky, kind of what it's starting to look at the side. It's fairly warm out here, so it's not going to take too long. We're going to use one of these patches because it's a little smaller and a little easier to apply a smaller patch because you don't have to braid as large of an area. Now if you have a huge hole, well, once it's very large, it's quite possible that it may not be best to patch it. But we have this patch right here. And we have a fairly small hole. I know the hole is in the middle there, I think. It has this foil backing. It has this plastic on the top. And oops, this one is kind of cheap, so it's hard to get apart. But what you're going to do is when you're ready to apply it, you're going to peel, act like it's a sticker. You don't want to touch the bottom of this patch right here. And then I'm going to position it over where that hole is. I hope that was where that hole was. And I'm going to push it in. I'm going to leave this plastic on here because a lot of times you can actually remove the patch if you try to remove it too early.
That's a bit of a veteran tip there too. The vast majority of people, once they've learned how to put on patches, once it's completely sealed, you can pull that off and it looks completely normal. The patch just becomes part of the tube. But then you notice a lot of people will try to peel that plastic off too early. You can just leave it on.
It's also possible that your patch will stick to the inside of your tire.
Yes.
Which makes it a little difficult to work with it in the future. So I'm just working it in, pressing it together. And then when you're done, what you can do is you can check if you've adhered it well by peeling. You probably are going to have to come a lot closer to see what I'm going to show you because my fingers are kind of in the way. What I'm doing is I'm peeling it, I'm kind of moving it down, and you see how the patch is moving with the tube. It doesn't look like a sticker that's not adhering. And that's showing you that that patch looks like it had a good connection right there. If it's flapping up, and it doesn't look like it's adhered, and it's like a sticker that's doesn't have any adhesive, your patch probably failed. And you can see this one's coming off, and the same thing is very well attached there. Okay, and then now it's time to put everything back together because that patch looks good and everything looks good. And you've checked the tire for anything that caused that puncture. Make sure that it's clean and everything. Check your rim tape to make sure that's intact. And then I say just put a hair of, not a hair, just put enough air in here so that it has shape. One of the dangers of reassembling the tube and putting the tube into your tire is that if you fold it up or get it all bunched up and then you put it in here, it might seem fine at first. And then when you get to the higher pressures, it could explode. And then you might need a new tire, you might need a new tube. If it was a really high pressure, you might need a new rim. But, so you want to be careful with this. And that's one of the reasons why this is a little more difficult. It's very large and hard to get into the right place. I find it easiest to put the tube first into the tire, like this. That also makes sure that you're not bunching it up very much. You can see that that's sitting in there very nice and all. Some tires will have direction, the one in my hands does not, and there will be an arrow on the side. This one you can't even see the side. Yours has a direction, I think. Does it?
It shouldn't.
Sometimes, okay, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll have a directional arrow, and you can see those on some of these. And that will be important, especially when you have a rear wheel, which this is the drive side, so this will be the direction of rotation. And so you just want to make sure that arrow is going. Just imagine it's on the bicycle, imagine it spinning forward, and that's the direction you want that arrow to be. So make that same movement. Okay, so let's say we will line this up correctly. This is right here. You need to get your valve into the right place. That's a very important step. And if your rim tape is not lined up right, this can be kind of difficult. Also, this is a bad time to discover you have the wrong valve on the tube if you just replace it if you didn't use the same tube.
Personal experience?
Not actually, but okay. So you get the valve in there, then one side of the bead at a time. So we're the whole tire except for this part right here is on top of the wheel, and I'm just working the back side onto the. I wonder how to do this. Working the back side of the bead onto there. And you see it popped on? So now this side of the bead is all inside the rim. Then, I guess I should do it this way so you can see. I'm going to try to line this up so that you don't want your valve like that. First of all, it's going to be really hard to install, and it's very easy to cause damage to the side of your valve. So you want to this is where you want to make sure your valve is in the correct orientation, which should be perpendicular to the rim. Then we can put this on this side. I like doing this on this side because a lot of times some of the valve, especially if you have a very thick tube, it can be easy to actually have the tube underneath your tire and it doesn't seat properly. So when you go and inflate it, you can imagine this is resting right on top of your tube. When you inflate your tube, it's going to push out, push up and over, and you can unseat your tire. So you want to make sure that the valve is not, the tube is not interfering with your tire at all. Then I want to make sure that all of this tube is on the inside of the rim, right there. This got twisted a little bit when I moved it. And if it has a very loose fit, it can be very hard to get this line because every movement you make is going to move it. Now I would say that everything's in about the right place and I should release some air. It's going to be a little easier to move and proceed from here. And then I'm going to move around. So I need to move on both sides. If I just move on one side, it'll just keep going around and keep going in a circle. And that's not going to give me any further. So I'm going to start pushing the speed on. Probably want to have it flat like this. Over here, over here. And it's best if you can get this on with your fingers. Make sure the tube isn't getting stuck in there. So the tube inside here is not in the way at all. It's inside the rim, or between the rim, right there. And so I can push it on like that. Sometimes it will be very, very difficult. And what I would recommend you do, so if I can't get it back off, what I recommend you do, if you have a bit that you cannot get back on, if you have a bit that you cannot get back on, let's try to make this difficult, and it's really hard and you can't do it. First, move some other things around. See if you can release it. Maybe it's stuck somewhere on this side, especially if you can push on and it's in there. And try to move it around, try to get it to go. Make sure your tube is not being interfered. Now, if all that fails, what you can do is use the tire lever. Realize I'm holding it the opposite way I was holding it before. Make sure that you're not getting the tube in between anywhere else. And just go like that. And then finally, want to make sure this thing is still straight. Don't tear it off. Make sure it's in there all right. And then you want to inflate probably to a low pressure, let's say 10 or 20 psi. If you go to all the way at the beginning, you are going to, if something's not in the right place, it's very likely it's going to blow out. And you probably don't want that. So now it's up to 20. What you want to do is check around, visually check that everything is at least in the right place. Your valve is in the right orientation. Around the edge right here, at least it looks like it's fairly even. It's a little recessed over here, and you can see that. That's okay to be a little recessed in one part, but what you're checking for is if it's bulging off or there's any bulging. And around here, checking from this side over here. For example, you want to grab that one right there with the little funny thing on it. For example, you saw this.
Ooh.
This is actually because someone tried too hard to install this. And and so this tire was actually destroyed by trying to force the tire onto a rim that was a tight fit.
It's about $35, that tire.
This is like a
Yeah.
Ramon's nice tire. So you don't want to. That's why I'm telling you not to force it. Try to be careful. If you do have a lot of difficulty, one thing you can also do is soapy water on the edge. And that'll lubricate it, so you're not fighting against the friction, and that can make it a little easier. But try not to force something. And it would be much better to discover this before the whole thing blew off, and then you needed to do treat too. Just compounding your bones. If everything looks good, then you can bring it up to the desired pressure, or if you want to be very careful, you can bring it up to more pressure, check again, and make sure everything's in good order. Any questions? Okay.
Wants to get dirty.
Oh yeah, we have enough. I don't know if we have enough